Welcome to Request for Inspection. Sit back, relax, and concentrate, as the coming crime recap is not for the faint-hearted. In 1987, Rob Kissel and Nancy Kissel began dating in New York, and soon after, they moved in together. While on vacation at a Caribbean resort for singles, they became friends. When they first met on a nudist beach, he said to her, "I'll bet you look great with clothes on." Rob was one of 3 kids, and the family enjoyed comfortable living when his father's business grew. They had a sizable house and also a second property in Vermont. Nancy had a history of experiencing emotional abandonment and loneliness, but after meeting Rob Kissel, she began to feel protected and cared for. They made the decision to get married in 1989, after spending only 2 years together. Nancy quickly realized that her husband had more ambition than she did. He was cool-headed and ambitious, whereas she was fun-loving and inventive. While Rob completed his master's in finance at NYU, Nancy provided for the couple by working at Caliente Cab Company. What could go wrong? It was now Rob Kissel's life began a rapid ascent. He appeared to have a golden future ahead of him. After earning his degree in 1991, he started working at Lazard Frères in New York. After 5 years, he moved to Goldman Sachs. This would forever alter the course of his life. Rob was given a tremendous opportunity. He received a job offer in 1997 to serve as vice president of the Asian Special Situations Group at Goldman Sachs in Hong Kong. He promptly moved to Hong Kong with his wife and their 2 children. They all found it to be a terrific adventure and a lifestyle, very different from what they were used to in New York. All of the kids went to a prestigious Hong Kong international school. Almost 7.5 million people call Hong Kong home. It has the second largest number of billionaires of any city in the world. There is a significant income gap, and many locals work as maids, drivers, cleaners, and personnel for the wealthy. The Kissel family, along with many other foreigners and some of the richest people in the world, resided in the upscale Parkview private housing complex. It boasts a clubhouse, spa amenities, dining options, and recreational opportunities. It is situated south of Hong Kong's downtown in the lush center of Tai Dam Country Park. Nancy enjoyed showing off her wealth. She was a huge spender even back in New York. Rob's friends claim that he was more concerned with moving up the corporate ladder than making a lot of money. To Nancy, however, money was everything. Rob received a new job offer in 2000, this time from Merrill Lynch. He was assigned to lead the Asia-Pacific distressed assets business. It goes without saying that Nancy did not see Rob very often because he spent the most of his time at work. She embraced her life as the wife of a very wealthy man. The couple had just welcomed their 3rd child, but Nancy still had plenty of free time thanks to the housekeepers and nannies they had hired. She was beginning to run out of things to occupy her. She launched a photography business, and played tennis on the side, but she still needed more. Nancy offered to do volunteer work at her kids' school. Later on, she said that Rob turned to drugs to cope with the pressures of his new position. She had so much free time away from him that he started to become controlling of her. He became so agitated that he had started to monitor her 5 credit cards. Nancy and the kids returned to the U.S. in 2003 due to the SARS pandemic. Many American expat families followed suit. They spent months in their Vermont house, where Nancy bought a home theater system. Nancy became captivated to the TV repairman, who came to the house to install the system. He went by the name Michael Del Priore. Following an open discussion that led to friendship, a passionate love affair quickly developed. Michael resided in a trailer park, and was a twice-divorced man. Nancy got his attention, and lavished him with love and expensive gifts. Nancy was convinced by Michael to have the names of her children and Chinese characters tattooed on her shoulder, despite Rob's wishes that she not get inked. Rob sensed that something was happening behind his back. To keep an eye on his wife, he hired private investigator Frank Shea, who is based in New York. Nancy Kissel's computer now has spyware on it thanks to Frank. Also, he kept an eye on the Vermont residence, and alerted Rob when he noticed Michael entering through the back door. Frank claimed that once Rob phoned Nancy, Michael hastily departed the house. Frank's account is as follows. The man left the house, climbed into his van, and sped off. Rob then called me at home and informed me that he had talked to Nancy. She was not informed that the house was being watched by someone. Nancy, "Don't do something dumb," he merely said. "The kids are here. We each made a commitment to putting this back together." By the end of the 2003 summer, Nancy quickly made her way back to Hong Kong. She continued to speak with Michael frequently, who remained in Vermont. Frank was requested to accompany her once more, when she and Rob took a flight to New York in August, so that Rob could undergo back surgery. Nancy didn't hang around the hospital for updates on her husband's condition, while he was having surgery in the operating room. Instead, she met her partner, Vermonter Michael, at a hotel close to Central Park. This time when Frank told Rob, he was devastated. Yet, he remarked, "Now, if I can just get her out of New York and get her back home." Even though the marriage had broken down, Nancy and Rob were still keeping up appearances. Nancy kept herself occupied by communicating with Michael on a prepaid cell phone, and Rob remained busy at work. A fellow expat, Andrew Danzer, who also resided in Parkview, came with his daughter to play with the Kissel children on Sunday night, November 2nd. They were about to depart when Nancy prepared them milkshakes. The Kissel's 6-year-old daughter brought them the milkshakes from the kitchen. Andrew drank it all at once, since he needed to get home quickly. Rob followed and swiftly drank it all. This would be the final time anyone would see Rob Kissel alive. A crucial conference call, that Kissel had been planning for with his co-workers for weeks, was also missed on Sunday night. Brina O'Shea, a friend of Rob's, was aware of his marital issues and assumed he had temporarily moved into a hotel. She called other hotels in Hong Kong, but she was still unable to locate him. She approached David No, vice president of Merrill Lynch in Hong Kong, who was also becoming concerned about his colleague and friend. David made an awkward phone call to Nancy Kissel, who informed him that Rob was dealing with personal issues. David didn't believe it, because if Rob had decided not to come to work, for personal reasons, he would have called. David decided to call the police, 3 days after Rob was last seen. Police swiftly arrived at Rob Kissel's apartment, and questioned his wife, Nancy. She claimed to have no idea where he was. Nancy appeared totally unconcerned about her husband's whereabouts. She stated that they had a fight and he just had left. Although there were no obvious signs of a struggle, the officers recalled a bad feeling, similar to a gut instinct that something sinister had occurred. Nancy informed the investigators that she had filed a report on the same morning, accusing her husband of assaulting her, because she refused to have sex with him. The investigators left it at that, but they were concerned about Mrs. Kissel. She wasn't forthcoming with information, and she didn't appear overly concerned about her husband's whereabouts. Nancy had called the apartment management the day before and asked if they could help move a carpet to her storage area. The worker claimed the carpet was so heavy that it took 4 men to move it. One of them later approached Nancy, and told her that the rug smelled like salted fish. The worker claimed she just ignored him. Police obtained a search warrant immediately, and searched Rob Kissel's storage space in the exclusive Parkview building, 4 days after he was last seen. A rolled-up oriental rug was discovered beneath a sheet, and some pillows. It was tied shut with rope and tape, and inside was something large wrapped in plastic. They discovered a decaying human body wrapped inside. A black plastic bag was placed over the head. They had discovered the rotting body of Rob Kissel. An autopsy revealed that Rob had suffered severe head trauma. He'd been struck 5 times in the head with a blunt instrument. Autopsy results showed he had 6 prescription drugs in his stomach, 5 of which were prescribed to Nancy Kissel in the months preceding her husband's murder. Police spoke to Andrew Danzer, who informed the cops about the brief visit, and more importantly the milkshake that they were given. He claimed that when he arrived home, he felt drowsy, and promptly fell asleep on the sofa. He couldn't remember much of the previous night the next day, but he assumed he was sick, and didn't think much of it. Nancy Kissel was arrested, and charged with Rob's murder, only 2 hours after his body was discovered, at 2:40 a.m. Rob Kissel's murder was one of the most widely publicized criminal cases in Hong Kong's history, as there was a lot of interest in what goes on inside the homes of the super-rich. It was a story with everything: lust, greed, vengeance, murder. It was called the Milkshake Murder, and it quickly became popular. Nancy Kissel admitted to murdering her husband, but claimed she was acting in self-defense. She described Rob as a tyrant with no heart. According to Nancy, they had frequent physical altercations during arguments. She also suspected that he was gay, and that he had sex with men when he was away on business. This was based on how he treated her in bed, as well as gay pornography she discovered on his computer. An independent computer expert confirmed this allegation. He discovered a search for anal sex in Taiwan on the Kissel family computer, just days before Rob left for business in Taiwan. Nancy and the kids were in Vermont at the time. In Nancy's recovered computer, it was discovered that her search history included terms like sleeping pills and medication to cause heart attack. Nancy stated that she was searching for herself because she was so desperate that she considered suicide. She had visited several doctors and obtained prescriptions for a lethal cocktail of dextropropoxythene, a pain reliever, Lorevin, a sedative, Rohypnol, Stilnox, a sleeping pill, and amitriptyline, an antidepressant. Rob had grown suspicious of his wife, according to Frank Shea, the private investigator hired by Rob to keep an eye on Nancy. Onder Tanzer, who had visited the Kissels on the day of Rob's murder, gave a chilling testimony, detailing what happened after he had Nancy's milkshake. In retrospect, it was truly sinister. Andrew had requested a glass of water when the little girl appeared moments later with a bright pink milkshake. Nancy poked her head out of the kitchen, claiming it was her secret recipe, inspired by Halloween, which had only been a few days before. The milkshake was sweet but heavy, with a banana and crushed cookie flavor. The milkshakes were laced with sedatives, which neither of the men realized. Andrew fell into a deep slumber on the couch when he got home. His wife tried everything to wake him up, shouting and slapping him across the face, but nothing worked. Andrew claimed that he acted strangely, tantruming like a baby. His hunger was insatiable after dinner, and he ate 3 cartons of ice cream by himself. He then went to bed and soiled himself while sleeping. He was hazy the next morning and couldn't remember anything. Rob is likely to have experienced the same side effects. Rob played with his son for the very last time after Andrew had left. He answered the phone when a colleague called about the work conference call that evening. Rob didn't sound like himself, according to his colleague. He appeared tired and sleepy. Rob would have needed to lie down if he had the same combination as Andrew. He most likely went to his own bedroom and fell asleep on the bed. Nancy took an 8-pound lead figurine, belonging to her grandmother, from the kitchen, and stood over her sleeping husband. She attacked him, repeatedly hitting him over the head, a total of 5 powerful blows. The next day, she went out and bought a rug to wrap around her husband's body. She also purchased linen and pillows, and then instructed her cleaning lady not to clean the main bedroom. Nancy kept Rob's body in the apartment for 3 days, before calling the maintenance office to have the carpet removed. Nancy Kissel testified in court in her own defense, a risk taken by her defense team. She was no longer the blonde and glamorous trophy wife on her successful husband's arm. Instead, the pale and demure expat wore long dark hair, and wore all black, as if in mourning. Rob was well known in Hong Kong's expat community, and people knew him to be driven, hardworking, and ambitious. His wife saw things very differently. She went into detail about their relationship, including how Rob was upset when she gained weight during her pregnancies. Nancy claimed that he frequently raped and sodomized her over a 5-year period. She learned to accept it because it hurt less. One incident was so traumatic that she broke a rib. Although her testimony was chilling, she had no evidence to back up her claims, no medical reports, nothing. Nancy claimed that Rob occasionally directed his rage at their children. She recalled an incident that occurred while her daughter was playing on the bed and Rob was on the phone. He yanked her arm, breaking it. The daughter's nanny, on the other hand, testified that the daughter broke her arm while playing with her sister while Rob was not even present. Nancy was forced to admit on the witness stand that she had previously doctored Rob's whiskey with sedatives. She claimed she did it to calm him down so he wouldn't take his rage out on their children. Nancy maintained her version of events leading up to Rob's death. She claimed that 10 days before the murder, she and her husband discussed the possibility of divorce. "If there's a divorce, you don't ask for it," Rob allegedly told her. "I'm the one who brings in the cash. Divorce is not something you request. I request it." November 2nd, Nancy made milkshakes for the kids in the afternoon, but her version doesn't mention Andrew Tanzer's visit. Nancy claims that the children went out with the nanny in the late afternoon. Rob approached her in the kitchen and informed her that he had filed for divorce and would be taking the children with him. Nancy stated that he was holding a baseball bat at the time and joked that he needed it to protect himself from her. She followed him as he turned and walked down the corridor. She was holding the metal figurine from the kitchen. She yelled at him, demanding to know what was up. When she caught up to him in the hallway, their argument turned physical. He grabbed her wrist when she pointed her hand at him, and she tried to fight him off. She spat in his face at that point. He slapped her across the mouth in response. She stated Rob then drew her into his bedroom and threw her onto the bed for sex. Nancy struggled to free herself and crawled away as he drew her by her legs. That's when she grabbed the fallen figurine and hit him over the head with it. In shock, he slumped to the floor. She was astounded as well and offered to assist him, but he declined. Instead, he became enraged and picked up the baseball bat, swinging it at her. She shielded herself by holding the figurine in front of her face. Every time the bat hit the figurine, she heard the clinging sound. That was the end of her story. Nancy Kissel was unable to explain how she disposed of her husband's body when questioned. She claimed she had little recollection of the days following his death. She vaguely remembered driving somewhere, but not going to buy the carpet that had become a makeshift tomb. Nancy claimed that her memories of those 3 days came back in bits and pieces, and she was unable to account for her actions. The prosecution implied strongly that Nancy's lover, Michael, encouraged her to end her marital misery for good. He encouraged her, knowing that if Rob died and Nancy inherited his estate, she would return to America with the money, leaving him with a prosperous future. Multiple phone calls were made between them in the days leading up to and following Rob's death, according to phone records. She called Michael 6 times on November 4th. Nancy was also seen carrying a suitcase, some shopping bags, and the carpet she used to dispose of her husband's body on the day after Rob was killed, according to Parkview CCTV footage. There was no sign of an injury or that she was in any way in pain. She had gone to the doctor, who testified that Nancy had complained of total body pain, but there was no evidence of injury anywhere. Forensic experts determined that the baseball bat, discovered in the Kissel residence, was never used to strike Nancy. It had neither Nancy's nor Rob's DNA on it. Furthermore, after testing both the bat and the figurine, it was determined that the items never came into contact with one another. That meant Nancy's story about using the figurine to protect her face was false. Nancy pleaded not guilty because she saw herself as the victim, who acted in self-defense. After deliberating for 8 hours, the jury found Nancy Ann Kissel guilty of her husband Rob's murder on September 1, 2005. She was sentenced to life in prison. Nancy Kissel's conviction was overturned due to legal mistakes in 2010, and she was released. The prosecution moved quickly to ask for a retrial. She was back in court after a brief release from prison. During the appeal, her defense team stated that Rob Kissel told his wife on the night of the murder that he was going to file for divorce and seek custody of the children. This was the final straw for Nancy after years of domestic abuse. She pleaded not guilty to murder but guilty to manslaughter, claiming that she was provoked. The prosecution retaliated by presenting evidence of Nancy's affair with Michael and demonstrating that Nancy was the one who intended to leave. But she realized that if Rob died, she would be better off because she would inherit his $18 million estate. On March 25, 2011, a jury of 7 women and 2 men found Nancy Kissel guilty once more. She was sentenced to life in prison once more. This is a true tragedy involving 2 people who should have ended their relationship years ago. Rob could never answer for the deeds his wife accused him of because he was no longer alive. Many people doubt Nancy Kissel's claims of domestic abuse and believe she simply wanted to leave the marriage. Is there any sympathy for her if she was a victim of domestic abuse who never shared her story with anyone other than her lover in Vermont? Kissel is incarcerated at the Ty Lamb Institute for Women. Michael Del Priore was never charged criminally for his role in Rob's murder. He has since married his 3rd wife and moved on. He was inundated with Nancy's love letters to the point where he wrote the warden of Ty Lamb and requested that Nancy stop sending any more. Nancy's court case was refused by American officials in Hong Kong. In the aftermath, the sole focus shifted to the Kissel children, Elaine, June, and Race. First, they were sent to Nancy's father in the United States, as Rob had requested in his will. When the elderly Ira and his wife proved to be too much for them, Nancy's half-brother stepped in to help. When the burden of responsibility proved too great, Rob's brother Andrew and his wife Haley agreed to take it. Andrew dispatched a private jet to pick up Nancy's half-children. brothers he charged Rob's estate $8,000 for his services. He kept expanding his home and going out of his way to provide for his brother's children, eventually charging Rob's estate more than $170,000. Haley offered to raise Elaine, June, and race alongside her two daughters as Haley and Andrew prepared to divorce. Jane, Rob's sister, intervened and was granted custody of Rob and Nancy's children. They moved to Mercer Island, Washington, to live with their aunt. The family felt that it was for the best because Andrew had his sights set on his brother's entire estate and would not have stopped taking money for personal gain rather than using or investing it for Rob's children. Andrew, who had been found guilty of embezzlement and was going through a bitter divorce, was also murdered in a bizarre turn of events. On April 3, 2006, the crew of a moving truck discovered his body in the basement of his opulent Greenwich, Connecticut home. He was slouched on a chair, shirt pulled up over his head, hands bound behind his back, and stabbed in the back. There was a lot of blood in the basement, indicating a violent death. The victim was identified as Andrew Kissel after police were notified. Because he had defrauded so many people of millions of dollars over the years, the pool of potential suspects was quite large. His death was never solved, but investigators believed it was committed by the Kissel family's man Friday, Carlos Trujillo. He took on many roles, from driver to housekeeper to Andrew's only friend. As Andrew was about to be sentenced to federal prison for fraud, the theory developed that he had persuaded Trujillo to commit suicide. He had a lot of life insurance, but if he killed himself, his daughters would get nothing. There was, however, insufficient evidence to charge Trujillo. And, given the brutality of the scene, it was unlikely to be a suicide attempt. There were also various theories as to his death. In any case, his murder remains unsolved. The Kissel brothers were brilliant, successful, and prosperous. From the outside, it would appear that they had everything. But a storm was brewing, behind closed doors in both cases, that led to their unfortunate and yet gruesome endings. Thank you for watching, and be sure to come back for more gruesome crimes that shook the world.